Tommy forcing Cammy out was not something anyone expected to see this soon. Think about that for a moment. The same Tommy who spent 2 full seasons carrying MTEX on his shoulders, the same man who kept that company alive when everything around it was falling apart, is now the one standing at the door telling Cammy it is time to leave. And the shocking part is not just that it happens. The shocking part is why it happens. Because this moment is not about revenge, and it is not about pride. It is about survival. Something has changed in Tommy, something deeper than anger, deeper than loyalty, deeper than the old rules that used to guide every decision he made. And if this trailer is telling us the truth, Season 3 is about to show us a version of Tommy we have never seen before. A man who finally understands that saving everyone else might mean destroying everything he has built. The question is not whether Tommy is capable of forcing Cammy out. The question is what pushed him to a point where he felt he had no other choice. The moment where Tommy forces Cammy out is not just a dramatic scene thrown into the trailer to shock the audience. It is the result of 2 full seasons of pressure slowly building between these two characters. And to understand why this moment feels so powerful, we have to go back and look at the history between Tommy and Cammy, because their relationship has never been simple. From the very beginning of the series, Tommy was the one person keeping everything stable at MTEX. He was the one solving problems before they became disasters. He was the one holding the team together when the pressure from the oil business started tearing things apart. And yet, despite all of that, Tommy was never the one sitting in the chair of power. That position always belonged to Cammy. Cammy believed she understood the business. She believed she knew what was best for the company her husband built. But what we saw throughout Season 1 and Season 2 was something very different. Cammy was not running MTEX with experience or strategy. She was running it with emotion. And in an industry as ruthless as the oil business, emotion can be the most dangerous leadership style possible. One wrong decision can cost millions. One moment of pride can destroy relationships that took years to build. And unfortunately, Cammy made those kinds of decisions again and again. Tommy saw it happening. Everyone around them saw it happening. But for the longest time, Tommy stayed loyal. He stayed patient. He kept doing the work even when he was being underestimated, even when his ideas were ignored, even when he was treated like someone who was easily replaceable. That loyalty is what made Tommy such a powerful character in the first place. He was not driven by ego. He was driven by responsibility. The responsibility to keep the company running, the responsibility to protect the people working under him, and the responsibility to honor the legacy of the man who started it all. But loyalty has limits. By the end of Season 2, we saw something inside Tommy begin to change. The man who had spent years fixing other people's mistakes finally realized that no amount of effort was going to fix a system that refused to listen. Walking away from MTEX was not an emotional decision. It was a moment of clarity. Tommy understood that staying in a place where he was constantly fighting for basic respect was never going to lead to anything good. So he built something new. He opened CTT, and for the first time in the entire story, Tommy was no longer working under. The moment Tommy forces Cammy out is not going to happen in a burst of anger. It is not going to be one of those loud television scenes where 2 characters scream at each other across a table. If anything, it is going to be much quieter than that. And that is exactly what makes it so much more powerful. Because when Tommy finally reaches that decision, it will come from a place of deep understanding. The kind of understanding that only comes after someone has spent years watching the same mistakes repeat themselves again and again. Tommy has always been the kind of man who tries to fix things before they break completely. That has been his role since the very first episode of this series. When deals started going wrong, Tommy stepped in. When the field operations fell behind, Tommy stepped in. When tensions between people inside the company began to grow, Tommy stepped in again. For most of the story, Tommy was the quiet force keeping everything from falling apart. But there is something important about people like Tommy that often gets overlooked. When they finally stop trying to fix things, it usually means they have already reached the point where fixing things is no longer possible. And that is the situation we are walking into at the beginning of Season 3. Because the truth is, the oil business does not wait for anyone to figure things out. It doesn't slow down when leadership becomes uncertain. It doesn't pause while someone tries to learn lessons they should have learned years earlier. If a company shows weakness, competitors move in immediately. Investors start looking for safer places to put their money. Partners start reconsidering their alliances, and suddenly the entire structure that once looked stable begins to shake. This is exactly the storm Cammy is standing in when the new season begins. For a long time, Cammy believed that determination alone could keep MTEX strong. She believed that holding on to control meant protecting her husband's legacy. But control without the right support system is fragile. When Nate left, she lost one of the few people who could guide her through legal complications. When Rebecca walked away, she lost someone who understood how to manage the outside pressure building around the company. When Dale disappeared from the field operations, the technical backbone that kept projects moving forward began to weaken. And when Tommy left, she lost the one person who could connect all those moving parts into something that actually worked. What Cammy is left with now is not just a struggling company. It is a company that has lost its center of gravity. And that is where Tommy's new position becomes incredibly complicated. Because Tommy didn't just walk away from MTech to start a new chapter. He walked away to protect himself and the people who chose to follow him. CTT is not just another business venture. It is a second chance, a place where Tommy can finally build something the way he believes it should be built, with trust, with clear leadership, with a team that believes in the same vision. That kind of opportunity does not come often in life, and Tommy knows that better than anyone. So when Cammy reappears in his world asking for help, the situation becomes far more dangerous than it looks on the surface. Helping her does not just mean stepping into a difficult business problem. It means risking the stability of everything he has just created. It means inviting the same chaos that nearly destroyed him before. And this time, the stakes are even higher because Tommy is not the only one who could suffer if things go wrong. His entire team, the people who trusted him enough to leave MTech and start something new, could lose everything alongside him. That responsibility weighs heavily on Tommy. For years, he made sacrifices because he believed the company was worth saving. But now the question is different. Now he has to ask himself whether Cammy herself is worth saving. And that is a much harder question to answer. The trailer hints at several moments where Tommy appears calm on the surface, but clearly conflicted underneath. That is the kind of internal struggle this character has always carried quietly. He is not someone who makes decisions quickly. He watches, he listens, he thinks through every possible consequence before he finally takes action. And when he does take action, it's usually because every other option has already been exhausted. That is why the moment he forces Cammy out is going to feel so final. Because for Tommy to reach that point, he would first have to try everything else. He would have to try helping her stabilize the company. He would have to try offering advice. He would have to try finding some kind of compromise that allows MTech to recover without destroying the new life he has built at CTT. But if Cammy continues making the same mistakes, if her pride continues pushing the company deeper into danger, then eventually Tommy may realize something he never wanted to believe. Some leaders cannot be saved from themselves. And if that realization hits Tommy, the decision he makes next could change everything. Imagine that moment for a second. Cammy standing in front of him, still believing she has the authority she used to carry, still believing that Tommy will eventually fall back into the same role he held for years. And then Tommy calmly explaining that things are different now, that the company cannot survive under the same leadership anymore, that the only way forward might be for her to step aside. For someone like Cammy, hearing those words would feel like a betrayal beyond anything she has experienced before. Because in her mind, MTEC is not just a business, it's a symbol of her husband's legacy. Being forced out of it would feel like losing him all over again. But from Tommy's perspective, the situation looks very different. To him, the company is not a symbol, it is a system that either works or collapses. And if that system is collapsing because of leadership decisions, then protecting the people still inside it might require removing the person making those decisions. That kind of conflict is exactly the kind of storytelling this show thrives on. There are no easy villains in this situation. Cammy is not evil. She is grieving, proud, and desperate to hold on to something she believes belongs to her family. Tommy is not heartless. He is trying to prevent an even bigger disaster before it destroys everyone involved. But when two people see the same situation in completely different ways, confrontation becomes inevitable. And if the trailer is giving us even a small glimpse of what's coming, that confrontation is going to be one of the most intense moments this series has ever delivered. Because the moment Tommy forces Cammy out will not just change the future of MTEC, it will change how every single character in this story sees him from that point forward. The real question is not whether Tommy can make that decision. The real question is what happens to him after he does. While the conflict between Tommy and Cammy is already intense enough on its own, the trailer quietly reminds us that there is a much larger danger looming over everything. And that danger has a name that every character in this story should be terrified of by now. Galino. Because while Tommy and Cammy are dealing with the internal collapse of MTEX, Galino is watching from the outside with the patience of someone who understands exactly how power works. He is not the kind of antagonist who storms into a situation with loud threats and reckless actions. Galino is something far more dangerous than that. He is patient, he is strategic, and most importantly, he knows when to wait for the perfect moment to strike. At the end of Season 2, Galino made something very clear to Tommy. Their agreement was never going to be simple. When Tommy stepped into that arrangement, he did it because there were no other doors left open. Bob was not a reliable solution. The financial pressure was building, and Galino was the one man willing to provide the kind of backing that could keep everything alive. But deals with men like Galino are never just business deals. They are leverage. Galino does not invest in people because he believes in their dreams. He invests in them because he wants control. He wants influence. He wants to know that the people he helps will eventually owe him something that cannot easily be repaid. And Tommy understood that risk the moment he shook Galino's hand, but at the time it was a risk he felt he had no choice but to take. Now, the consequences of that decision are starting to unfold. Because if Tommy becomes deeply involved in the collapse of MTEX, Galino will not see that as an act of loyalty or compassion. He will see it as an opportunity, a chance to tighten his grip around the entire situation. From Galino's perspective, a weakened MTEX and a distracted Tommy create the perfect environment for expansion. Think about it from Galino's point of view. A major company in the oil industry begins to crumble because its leadership cannot hold it together. The man who used to keep that company stable is now running his own operation with new partners and new ambitions. And both of those entities are connected by years of history and unresolved tension. For someone like Galino, that is not chaos. That is a chessboard. Every move Tommy makes to help Cammy could create new leverage points for Galino to exploit. If Tommy pulls resources from CTT to stabilize MTEX, Galino gains more influence over both companies. If Cammy becomes desperate enough to accept outside help, Galino could position himself as the only person capable of saving the situation. And if the two companies become entangled in financial or operational agreements, Galino could end up controlling far more than anyone ever intended. This is what makes the moment Tommy forces Cammy out so much more complicated than it first appears. On the surface, it might look like a personal conflict between two characters who have reached the end of their patience with each other. But underneath that emotional confrontation lies a much larger strategic reality.
If Cammy remains in control while the company continues to weaken, Galino could eventually absorb MTEX piece by piece. But if Tommy takes control of the situation and pushes Cammy out, the power structure of the entire industry around them could shift overnight. Either way, Galino wins something. And that is exactly why his presence in this story is so terrifying. Galino does not need to rush. He does not need to reveal his full intentions immediately. All he needs to do is watch the pressure build between Tommy and Cammy until one of them makes a move that changes the balance of power. The trailer hints at several moments where Galino appears calm, almost detached from the chaos unfolding around him. That calmness is not indifference, it is confidence. Because Galino understands something that many other characters in the story do not fully grasp yet. When powerful people begin fighting each other, the smartest player is the one who stays outside the fight and waits to collect the pieces afterward. And if Tommy does force Cammy out of MTEX, the ripple effects of that decision will travel much farther than either of them expects. Investors will start asking questions, competitors will start looking for weaknesses, former allies might begin reconsidering where their loyalties truly belong.